I'm Dawn Pumi. Today on LA Currents, Supervisor Holly Mitchell takes a balanced approach to tackling the many concerns her team deals with on a daily basis. Later, members of the LA Civil Rights Department join Anita Bennett to discuss how they protect Angelenos from discrimination and fight for equity. But first, Councilwoman Traci Park is known for her boots-on-the-ground practicality. She talks to Natalia Bilbao about involving stakeholders in her district decisions, public safety concerns on the West Side, and increasing transparency at City Council.
Spending 20 years as an LA municipal attorney gives you a lot of insight into what some of our city's general issues are. With this background, it's no surprise that today's guest would choose City Hall as her next workplace. I'm very excited to be joined by the councilwoman who represents the West Side District, Traci Park. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So 2023, very busy, very intense. What are some of the lessons from that year that you've been carrying on to this 2024, the first 6 months of 2024?
One of the things that I learned kind of early on was that through the council office, you have the opportunity to really bring vision and leadership to how things work in your district.
Right.
And so for us, when it came to homelessness, it was getting to know all of our embedded nonprofits and service providers. The number one issue that I hear about from my constituents now are the RVs and the vehicle dwelling. So we are shifting our resources and our focus to the more acute issue of the vehicle dwelling. That's one shift and change. In my first year in office, obviously the public safety and staffing levels in LAPD and at LAFD were big concerns. I have advocated for additional resources and funding for our public safety partners. But we've had different issues around public safety this year than we did last year. We started to see a dramatic increase in the number of residential burglaries, commercial burglaries,
retail theft,
car smashes. And so we've been working very closely with LAPD to deploy additional resources. Our collective top priority remains public safety. So we're continuing on those efforts with the recruitment and the investments and retaining our staff in public safety, but we still have a lot of work to do.
What can you tell me about the city charter reform?
I took office at a moment when trust in local government was at an all-time low. And I am so grateful to Council President Paul Krikorian, who has led this committee to get this effort done. If passed by the voters, is going to reaffirm our commitment to be a city that's transparent and accountable to our constituents.
Also, because people talk about, well, let's look at other big cities like New York and Chicago. There's 50 different districts and council members. So shouldn't LA also be updated to reach those numbers as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And certainly the question of redistricting, I think, raises the question of, do we want to consider increasing the number of council districts? I've been pretty outspoken that I'm not supportive of this at this point. You know, I have spoken to thousands of people over the last few years about the biggest issues facing our city. Not one of them has asked for more politicians as a solution to the problem. And so I really think, you know, what is it that we're trying to solve for? If it's better constituent services, really what I need is more staffing, and I need to have city vacancies filled and, you know, more sanitation workers to collect the trash more frequently. If we're trying to solve for some type of corruption, I'm not sure more politicians is the best way to get us there. And frankly, when, you know, you talk about there are more council members in places like New York and Chicago, I have yet to see any evidence that constituents in those cities are any more satisfied with their elected leaders than people in Los Angeles are with theirs.
Well, it's true, and people say that you're a very boots on the ground councilwoman, and so how are you getting your constituents more involved in policies and in really getting their needs across to you and to your team?
Well, there's almost nothing that we say no to in CD11. We go to every meeting, every community gathering that we're invited to, and we create ones to bring people to us. And so my team and I go to all of our neighborhood council meetings. They are the subject matter experts in their own neighborhoods. So that collaboration and interaction has been extremely important to us. We go to everything because it's important that we're present, that we know our communities and its stakeholders and leaders, and that I am effectively being their advocate in City Hall.
Let's talk about the connectivity status of LAX and what's happening in that regard.
So one of the biggest capital improvement projects going on anywhere in the entire country is the People Mover at LAX. And so this is something that is going to absolutely change how people travel to and through our nation's second largest airport. And it's something that, you know, during the pandemic, there were challenges, there were delays, and it's not uncommon on a large project like that to find challenges that happen. So we are really excited that we are in the process of getting that wrapped up and really looking forward to having that done and ready to go, certainly before the 2028 games. The real question is, are we going to have it done before the World Cup in 2026?
Yes, because there's 2026, Super Bowl in 2027, Olympics 2028, so packed future ahead indeed.
Indeed. And so that is something that through my committee, Trade, Travel, and Tourism, we keep a very close eye on, and I'm in regular communication with LAWA about the status of it.
So another important project that has to do with the Olympics too is the expansion of the LA Convention Center.
The investment in our convention center is long overdue. This is something that elected leaders in Los Angeles have now been talking about for decades, and just for whatever reasons have not previously moved forward with it. So as chair of Trade, Travel, and Tourism, I fully recognize the hundreds of millions of dollars in economic revenue that this will bring to our city. I'm aware that it's going to provide 10,000 jobs during construction and beyond. And so there are real reasons to do this. As the chair of the Olympics Committee, I am also well aware that the convention center cannot be under construction during the Olympics. In fact, it's going to need to be done well before, because there are events scheduled in the convention center as well as surrounding nearby locations. And so all of that would be impacted. But I think the council has been very clear in those instructions that if for any reason we can't do this on time or on budget, or if the terms don't come together as we hope they will, that we're going to have to put a pause on it and wait until after the Olympics are over. We cannot risk having any of those events move outside the city of Los Angeles.
I know that Measure HLA got approved, and so what are going to be the challenges of that moving forward, especially on the west side with the Olympics, tourism, Angelenos, congestion?
Yeah.
How are you going to address this moving forward?
So, you know, this is something that we are actively working on in the Transportation Committee, which I vice chair, thinking about the implementation plan for HLA and how this is going to roll out. I had some very serious concerns about this. It doesn't create the opportunity that I would have liked to have seen, which was to establish an actual completed network of bike lanes around the city.
Right.
I would have rather spent the time and the money connecting our Olympic venues, for example, so that folks who wanted to experience the city on bike while they're visiting Los Angeles would have the opportunity to do that. I am concerned instead that we're not likely to have much completed. I am concerned about our ability to fund these projects. And so it's a bit of a balancing act, and there's going to be a lot of work.
So what are the best ways to stay in touch with you, your team, and everything that's happening across your district?
So definitely following along with social media. I am at Councilwoman Traci Park on Instagram and Facebook, and probably the best thing though is to sign up for my weekly newsletter. I put that out every Saturday morning, and that's where I communicate policies and rules that we're working on in City Hall, things I want folks to be aware of and follow along with. I also communicate a lot of information about what's happening on the west side and impacting folks in their own neighborhoods. So I only send that out once a week. I don't want to overburden people with unwanted emails, but this is a great resource to follow along. If you go to the CD11 website, which is cd11.lacity.gov, you can sign up for my newsletter there. It's a great way to stay in touch.
Wonderful. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, Councilwoman. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's always fun to come in. We'll do it again soon.
Limiting rent increases for tenants, helping mom and pop landlords, and tackling RV encampments. Supervisor Holly Mitchell talks to Maria Hall Brown about the compromises necessary to serve as many community members as possible.
Well, she served a decade with the California legislature before turning her focus to the County of Los Angeles. I'm delighted to be joined today by the Supervisor for the 2nd District, Supervisor Holly Mitchell. So nice to have you here.
It's wonderful to be with you again. I can't believe it's been so long, so thanks for having me back.
It has. And you're in your 2nd term now, so fabulous.
Yes.
All right, we're just going to get straight to it because there are so many things that I want to talk to you about. But I know, obviously, on top of mind for absolutely everyone in the city and county of Los Angeles is, of course, homelessness. And you've been really working diligently to get a lot of RV encampments moved. So where are you in that process and how are things going?
So the RV encampments has been a fascinating, really kind of learning experience and process. They are focused really in unincorporated areas of LA County. And when we did an assessment, there are like 7,000 countywide, 2,000 of them are in the 2nd District. And so it really has been top of mind of my constituents, small businesses in the 2nd District, and of course my staff and I. And we came up with the motion for the RV encampment removal, which is really kind of a different process than people living on the streets in tents. Pilot program, our goal, we set a goal that we've already exceeded, but to think about the public resources, the number of county departments that are involved, the state agencies that are involved, Department of Motor Vehicles, if they are on the border of a city and unincorporated, the municipal services that are involved. It has really been an incredible feat to watch come together. But I'm very proud because our RV encampment removal motion really led to Pathway Homes and is an integral part of Pathway Homes, which is the county's housing program. Really proud that in relative short order, since we launched it just a year ago, we've removed 200 unsafe recreational vehicles. We've moved 400 individuals into interim housing and about a quarter of that number now into permanent housing. Working collaboratively with community-based organizations, intensive outreach leading up to moving day. But I think that we have found the right process to successfully help people transition out of RVs into first temporary and then permanent supportive housing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is that, it's a long process in the fact that, there is that pathway to permanence. Mm-hmm. But are you worried about more and more and more encampments cropping, up while you're working on the ones that you're aware of?
Well, we've done a couple things in this motion. A good number of these RVs have been dismantled.
Oh, okay.
So our goal was to take them out of this kind of a loop feeder system where they go to auction, people we call van lords bid on them, buy them, and then drop them in the street. What we found is sometimes you see the RVs on fire, they've been burned out, and people assume that those were the unhoused people setting them on fire. What we have found is that's a strategy used by the van lords against people who haven't paid rent.
Seriously?
Tragically, so many people who live in these RVs, a good number, don't own them. It's a low rent, if you will, option. And so they're really being preyed upon by these van lords who are renting to them substandard housing.
I had no idea.
And so part of our motion is to get them out of circulation, so I'm very proud of that. We're also working collaboratively with the communities where we've done RV encampment removals to come up with ways in which that stretch of property can change. You know, sometimes it's painting the curb red, sometimes it's not because it's in front of businesses. So we've talked about working with community to identify, you know, beautification strategies, whatever works per community to try to keep that block from having RVs come back. The RVs that are owned by the residents that may need a new carburetor or their tags brought up to speed, a part of this program is also helping them get their RV up to code, if you will, and continuing to look for safe parking options so people can actually use it, if it's habitable, as a place to reside. The years I represented the Downtown Women's Center when I was in the state legislature, hearing from women about, you know, living on the streets in tents, that how for many of them it felt more safe than in shelters. And how they built community, and people felt safe and protected by the people around them in their tent community. And so I think what I've learned from many who've been living in RVs is they felt that same sense of community and safety. And so, you know, we're trying to honor and respect that as we find placements to offer them.
Obviously, affordable housing is imperative in all ways, but there's also the issue of rental caps that has been very prominent in terms of, you know, focus. How is that being balanced with the, you know, the rights of the property owners? You know, they might be, you know, that might be their only property and that is their source of income. So how are you working in that very tough, nuanced scenario?
I appreciate you acknowledging that it is a tough, nuanced scenario, because from my perspective, in the district I have the privilege of representing, you know, mom and pop property owners are really the bread and butter of our affordable housing infrastructure. You know, through COVID, to hear property owners say, I know my tenants, we work collaboratively. If I can keep them housed by, you know, not going up in the rent and for tenants to say there's some flexibility when it's a mom and pop that I can negotiate, you know, I don't have it all, can I give you a portion? As opposed to corporations that are kind of on autopilot, and the 3-day pay or quit notice is really on autopilot and it just appears on your door. And tenants who are like, you know, I don't even really know who to call or contact to have a conversation. So the mom and pops are an essential element in preserving our current affordable housing stock. And so you're right, how do we create this balance? I introduced a motion a couple of weeks ago that I think it's as good as it could be, that we struck a balance. And how do I assess that? Because everybody had something negative to say. The tenants felt that the protections weren't enough for them. The mom and pop thought it wasn't enough for them. And basically we are protecting tenants by capping potential increases, but we acknowledged mom and pops and put in increases. I think the tenants' rights people didn't want any increases. They're acknowledging, as the advocates say, the rent in LA County and the state of California is just too damn high. Hearing mom and pops, knowing how they also suffered during COVID, knowing the age of the affordable housing stock in LA County, you know, they need new roofs. We have earthquake retrofitting. We are in a insurance existential or otherwise crisis where it's increasing by leaps and bounds. So acknowledging that. Also, I know if a mom and pop chooses to sell their property, there aren't a lot of mom and pop buyers in the market right now. So I want to protect that mom and pop owner so we don't lose that property to the corporations. So we did do rental increases. We tried to make it within a margin that we thought was fair to protect tenants and their needs, to give mom and pops the option to raise it up to 4%. Luxury apartments, the increase was just 1% more, to really create this balance, to try to meet the needs of everybody. It's not easy in public policy making, but like I said, if we strike a balance where no one feels like they were a winner, it's probably the best policy I could bring forward to the board.
So if people want to follow all of these things that you are doing, what's the best way for them to be able to watch all of the things that you're participating in?
my county website, which is mitchell.lacounty.gov, and Holly J. Mitchell on all other social media platforms.
Well, Supervisor Mitchell, this is absolutely fascinating. Promise me that you'll come back, because when you first were here, you had just started and it was the pandemic. Lots has changed, and we can't wait to really learn what other things you're doing in the future.
I appreciate it. I'd love to come back.
Capri Maddox and Jumana Silian Saba talked to Anita Bennett about LA's Civil Rights Department. Hate has no home in LA is its central message, and that's more than a slogan now, that the department has a power to prosecute.
Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Well, Los Angeles has a department dedicated to protecting residents from discrimination and leveling the playing field. So how do they go about doing all of that, and what types of cases do they take on? Joining us with some insight, we have Capri Maddox. She is the Executive Director of the LA Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department. And also we have Jumana Silian Saba. She is the Director of Civic Participation and Human Rights. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So tell us about that work. What role does this department have in the big picture?
We were founded in 2020, appointed by our previous mayor, Mayor Eric Garcetti. We're very grateful for the privilege now to serve under the leadership of Mayor Karen Bass as we lift 5 commissions and fight hate, discrimination, and inequities on all fronts. We have challenges as it relates to hate cases soaring in the city of Los Angeles, but we fight it with our aggressive campaigns to address it by celebrating all cultures in Los Angeles. If you have Heritage Month, we have a program to celebrate your community.
What I want to know, Jumana, how do you enforce, when you say you're fighting discrimination, how do you enforce this?
One of the pillars of our department is implementing the Civil Human Rights Law for the City of Los Angeles, which was signed in July 2019. And so within the purview of the law, we have the capacity to not only investigate, but we also have subpoena power. And so a big part of what we do in the department is to address discrimination in the private sector. And so our purview is limited to the private sector, and that is in education, employment, housing, and commerce.
So are you working at all with the city attorney's office, or are you doing this enforcement in-house?
So the enforcement is within our department. So it is within the purview of our department to implement the human rights law, but to also do the enforcement of the law as well. When it comes to the penalties, and one of the things I really want to highlight about this law, we're not the only city that has it. There are other cities that have it, but LA in particular, in the way the law was written, it has a lot of teeth, which gives us the ability to not only implement penalties, which could go up to $125,000 or $250,000 if there is harassment or violence uncovered during the course of our investigation. So we have the ability to enforce those penalties.
Capri, are there ever any cases that are too big for the department to take on? Let's say a corporation just has widespread discrimination. How do you approach that?
There is no case too big for us. We want to be intentional to send a strong message that hate has no home in Los Angeles and discriminatory practices will not be tolerated. We are grateful. We just had a big case against Smart and Final. It's a major corporation where there were practices happening with a bag check policy that were done in a discriminatory manner. The customer was asked to leave his bag at the front of the store, whereas other customers were not given such a security measure when they entered the store. And we had an African American male who had the presence of mind to take pictures of other folks that were in the store to identify the fact that these folks were carrying their bags openly, and they actually weren't even aware of the bag check policy. So we want to make sure that we have equity in many spaces, and people need to be treated properly in the private sector.
Talk to me about discrimination in housing. How widespread is this problem in the city?
because we have jurisdiction limitations, and the state has a wide swath of that area, we have just a few areas where we can bring cases as when you think about housing. And in these spaces, maybe based on your financial ability to pay is something that's important, but how you pay. If someone mistreats you because you are a Section 8 tenant, that may be an issue. If someone is treated differently or not allowed to rent an apartment because they may have an accent, primary language is a protected class. And so we want to be intentional to let folks know that although we don't have the entire purview, like we can't do race or gender discrimination in those spaces with LA City, as Jumana mentioned, we actually will pass on those cases to our state partners.
Mm-hmm. What types of cases do you see the most often?
Year to date, we've received 861 inquiries.
Wow.
So we do get quite a large number of people reaching out to us. We do see quite a bit of calls come in related to housing, potential discrimination in housing. Our next one is commerce. So it's housing, commerce, and then we have education and employment where we see a little bit less.
You mentioned housing, you see the most. Lately, there's been a lot of cases nationwide where a person, tried to buy a house and they were appraised, let's say a black or brown person was appraised much higher than a Caucasian person. Do you get those kinds of cases?
When you think about the appraisals, homes that are owned by people of color and women tend to be valued at a lower level.
Oh.
And there's so many discriminatory practices that happen in housing. I mean, there are even people of color who will set aside a friend, a Caucasian person, to show their home when the appraisal process is happening, or they may take their pictures off the wall to, make sure that it does not impact the value of their home. This is something that there's countless studies on, and I know Tavis Smiley on 1580 AM has had many shows in this space. So it is an issue. Another issue we actually are looking at is the fact that African Americans and Latinos pay about $1 billion more for their mortgages in America. Over about $1 billion more for their mortgages today compared to their Caucasian counterparts with the same credit score and a job salary. I want to be intentional to tell you there are discriminatory practices that are happening with banks. Actually, banks even looking at surnames on how they handle and manage accounts, and that is something we're looking into right now in the city of Los Angeles.
If someone is experiencing this problem, how do they get in touch with your office?
So folks can reach us on the web at laisforeveryone.com. They can call us at 213-978-1845, or they can come down to our offices at the LA Mall, 201 North Los Angeles Street, suite number 6.
Are you guys on social media to get the word out?
Yes, we are. We are proudly on all social media platforms at LA Civil Rights.
Excellent. And you mentioned, before we wrap up, you mentioned LA for All. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, LA for All is an award-winning campaign to send a strong message on the offensive that hate has no home in the city of Los Angeles. It's a campaign in 21 languages. We have blanketed the city in over 5,000 ad spaces, and people can also use our sign in their businesses, dorm rooms, or other places and spaces to send a strong message in 21 languages. Any language they order, they can go to laisforeveryone.com/LA for all, and they will have an opportunity to actually request our posters.
I have learned a lot today. Thank you so much for this enlightening conversation and letting people know that there is help out there. Capri Maddox and Jumana Silian Saba of the LA Civil Rights Department.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. It
Excellent.
was truly a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Thank you for watching and have a great day.